Chris.
Stephanie, how are you? Happy
Thursday to you too. How was your 1,800-mile run today? Did you get that in?
I have not done my 1,800-mile run today. I did over the previous weekend. I think I told you guys I ran the Colorado Trail, ran a segment of the Colorado Trail, and in my wisdom, I ran right by two bighorn rams. They're pretty freaking cool.
Oh, really?
Ran right by, didn't even see them until I turned around and was like, oh, I'm gonna take a picture of that sign that says Colorado Trail. There's two gigantic rams. So it's pretty special thing. And yeah.
I was sitting at my place looks down over top of an elementary school. I was on a phone call and I was watching there were all these kids in the playground after school, like just tons of them. And I was watching this bear and her mama bear and her two baby bears come out on the field and then just kind of wandering towards the playground. And it's like, welcome to Squamish. Everybody was just like, yeah, hey, whatever.
Also, the fact that you live right by an elementary school is also why you haven't invited Anthony, because, the whole thing being close to elementary school.
I have a friend who lives down in Mendocino in California, and she does equine therapy, so with horses.
Yep.
And she's doing a certification program for equine therapy, and this is what she's always wanted to do. And she was working yesterday with these little ponies, and she said one of them was sick. I said, "How did you know?" And she said, "Well, it was a little horse."
Oh, both you and I, we've covered a lot of ground just on text this morning. We're both a little sleep deprived this morning, so it's probably not very funny.
Listen, the dad jokes get better with sleep deprivation. I am convinced.
I think that's 100% true. Covered some ground. We covered menopause. We covered Better Call Saul. We covered,
So the episode's done. We don't need to talk about anything else.
We covered a lot about mansplaining this morning and how people that say, hey, I'm not a misogynist, but almost by definition, you're a misogynist. You can't say, I'm not a misogynist, but, and then not be a misogynist.
And give me 8 pages as to explaining why you're not.
Let me give you the reasons why I'm not a misogynist. Yeah. We have covered some ground this morning.
When you're thinking about being a founder, what happens if your closing technique is actually killing your deals? Shocking stat. According to Salesforce's 2023 State of Sales report, 73% of sales professionals say they miss their quotas because they struggle with closing techniques. Pipedrive's Timo Rain discovered this when his sales team's close rate improved 35% after training reps on 5 different closing techniques instead of one standard approach. The lesson? Adaptability beats consistency in deal conversations. Today on How to Founder, we're going to talk about closing deals. I'm your host, Stephanie Hayes. With me today is my wonderful co-host, Anthony Franco.
I'm sitting right here.
Oh, that was intentional. I just miss him so much. Chris Franks has joined us, and he's sort of as good. And so we're going to talk about closing deals. We're going to talk about sales. Everybody wants to talk about sales because they love sales so much. But Chris, why do most founders struggle when in the closing conversations?
So I think the first and most obvious answer to this question is because we're cowards. We're afraid. We're scared. We're little chickens.
That's the men, right?
Not the women, for sure, not the women. I'm not a misogynist.
I'm not a misogynist. Let me explain to you why.
Let me explain to you how this works.
I held the door open for a woman once. I'm obviously not a misogynist.
I mean, I let my daughter, leave the
I have
house.
lots of female friends.
All right. So what I think is the real problem with closing is that you have to ask. And that's what closing is by definition. You get through this process and you get to a point whereby you have to have somebody make a decision. There is no other information. There's things called stalls we can talk about, which are kind of nefarious in the world of closing. But really, at the end of the day, what you're doing is asking somebody to make a decision. Now, why does that suck as a founder? It's because when somebody says no, it hurts our little founder feelings, Stephanie. Our founder feelings get hurt. And then, because we put so much time and energy and emotion and our egos tied up into our product or service that when somebody says no, it's can be a very painful thing. I don't know. What do I know? What about you, Stephanie? You're the wizard.
Well, I can see where you come from with your default fragile male ego, but I also think that I
thank you for mom-splaining.
for woman-splaining. I yes. So it's a yes and thing, right? I think there is, generally if we're all a little bit precious, right? And we, it's not even that we're fragile. I think it's that, we've put all our time and effort and heart and soul into this, and then it feels shitty for somebody. But I think even more than just the fear of rejection, it's very much about not knowing how, like not having the skills, because so many founders start up businesses because they're really good at what they do and they don't necessarily have the business skills, right? They're not necessarily business people. So there's a lot of like technique to selling, and it's very much almost an art form. And I would say it's also not that complex, but you do have to know how to move elegantly from like a selling conversation to a closing conversation. And there are some ways you can do that that don't feel so, on the nose as like, are you going to buy this or are you not going to buy this? And that's some of the things we can talk about today. But I think it's partially, our fear of rejection, but I think it's very much so not knowing how to move to a close.
I partially agree with you. I think that there is some technique to this process. And I think that there are ways that you can learn to build transitions into any sales presentation. And there is ways to get past those awkward phases of talking about pricing or starting times. There are techniques that you can use to do that. I tend to be a little bit more gruff on this subject, which is, what the fuck are you doing if you're not asking for the sale? There's no point of going through a sales process unless you're actually asking for a sale. And so I've seen and worked with founders and been with like managing sales teams back 150 years ago, where you'd see people work so hard to get to this moment and then they'd leave. I mean, Stephanie, closing the sale, I mean, it's kind of your thing. You can close it.
Is it? I have no experience with this, having never been able to close.
I've never really been able to close either.
Here's the thing. So, we talk about having sales toolkits and we talk about having like scripts and stuff like that. I actually think those are pretty ineffective. I think training, like understanding the psychology of a buyer, is probably the most effective thing you can do. And then having some of these little in your back pocket. When I learned some of these little transition tricks, it's not a script, but it's like if you understand how the buyer is thinking, just the way that you shift the conversation, you got to find the way to do it that feels most natural for you. And I think if you've done a good job throughout the whole sales process of building a relationship of trust, by the time you get to the sale, the thing to remember is that everyone's expecting you to ask them, or for there to be a point in time that they have to make a decision. Everyone's expecting that, right? So to pretend like it's not going to happen, or to pretend you're just being nice or what have you, if you have led this whole sales process in a way that creates that relationship with them, by the time you're ready to ask for the sale, they're ready to make the decision. So you do have to create that point in time. And I find a lot of people need a timeline in order to make a decision. And so how can you like what are some of the closing questions, or what are some of those transition things that you have used, phrases or techniques, to get from the talking about all of the reasons why and the benefits to let's make a decision?
If you'll allow me to back up just a half step, which is what I consider to be modern sales is teaching. And I think
Yep.
that in modern sales, it's about going in and understanding and then teaching the buyer or the buyer committee, if you're in a more business to business setting, about how you think about solving a problem, how your product or service approaches solving that problem. And so as you think about it that way, really my approach to transition from teaching to asking for the sale really is about checking for understanding. And so if I'm in that moment, I go, hey, does this make sense? Do you have any questions about the approach? Are there concerns? Is there anything about what I've been talking to you about in our discussion that doesn't seem to align or make sense based on the conversation? And for me, that's just part of the teaching process, which is also part of the selling process. I'm just checking for understanding along the way. And then in that moment where it's like, no, I don't have any other questions. I don't have any other in sales, we call it potential objections. But at that moment, you can either sit in awkward silence and go,
Okay,
are
great.
you going to ask for the sale, or are you going to tell me you want to buy now? Or you could simply say, all right, what do you want to do?
Yeah, and that's the question, right? Is you've got to have the intuition to be able to watch and read the journey that these people are on. And if they are still looking confused, or if they're still looking skeptical or what have you, then you have more consultative selling to do, right? But if you have added value and they're in this place where they're nodding their heads, and they seem to have a good understanding, a simple transition, or like if this all makes sense, should we talk about doing it here? Should we talk about what this looks like for you? And they're going to say, yeah, let's do that. Great. And and then you can transition to that conversation by saying, here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I think would work really well for you guys. And then you get into the conversation. You're setting the stage you're setting the terms for the sale, and you're giving them something to respond to, rather than walking away and saying, okay, well, let us know what you think, right? You're carving away. And my business partner she teaches sales and selling, and she's an amazing salesperson, and watching her work is just so much fun, because she just has this way of getting the energy to a place where people pull out their credit cards on our first call with them and are like, yes, please sign me up, right? So what she does really well is get them to a close. Now, sometimes we don't get to a close on the first call, but when she gets them to a close, it's a close. It's not a, okay, go away and think about it. It's a close because we've done such a good job of helping them envision what their life is going to look like once they've done the thing that we're proposing they do.
I think the other piece here is we're talking about closing and how do we get to a close and what are those transition moments. I think it's important to talk about what closing is not in 2025. And
Yeah.
so because there's these myths about what sales are, and you'll still see the old school sales world when you go into car dealerships occasionally, or classically people selling timeshares, et cetera, which is, it used to be, in the way that I was trained as a salesperson, and hopefully, well, some people that are our age definitely will remember, we ripped people's heads off. And that was the term that we used. It was about convincing somebody to do something, regardless of whether it was good for them or not. And so these closes were designed to manipulate people. They were designed to get somebody to do something that you wanted, and it was really not about the person. In 2025, that's very hard to do. It's almost impossible, and you're kind of a douchebag if you do it. So the question then becomes like, so what is a close? The puppy dog close, the balance sheet close, the either or close, all of those closing techniques that I learned as a sales professional, almost none of them matter anymore. Really, the only definition of getting a close is helping somebody make a good decision for them. And ideally, it's going to be with you. Ideally, you're going to be solving the problem that they have. Ideally, you're priced in a way that makes sense for them and adds enough value. But really, it's not about manipulation at all. It's simply asking somebody to make a decision based on all the information that you shared together. I think it's an important thing to talk about. I don't even know if that traditional approach of sales is taught anymore. Probably not. It's probably
I've been through,
lost.
yeah, I was taught early on in my career. I went through the whole Xerox sales training, like really.
Yeah, I mean, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah. I've been through, more recent sales training, and it really depends on the environment you're selling in. Like, so in my world, you either do launch sales or you do evergreen sales, right? And launch sales are a totally different animal because they are time based, and there is a real and natural deadline for people making a decision to join some event or program or whatever that starts on a certain date. And so there is a little bit more of the sort of pressure to get people through a process. But I still think in a place like that, in a situation like that, you need to be mindful of the type of buyer that you are talking to, right? And so your close technique is going to depend on who the buyer is. And there are buyers who, just deal with fear of making the wrong decision, fear of all that sort of thing. And if you know that that's your type of buyer, you're going to have a different close tactic than, a buyer who's by an early adopter and loves to try new things, or a buyer who is, emotionally driven, or a buyer, and you're going to get objections during the close process. There are some buyers who will just never decide in a close situation. They need to go and process and, think through things. And so I think that it's really important to understand who your buyer is, even in a corporate environment, right?
So what you're touching on, and I think this is probably from sales training back in the day, is one of the most powerful things that I learned, but it's a psychological element of humans. It's not necessarily a closing technique. And it's the idea of a stall. Stalls are not objections. Objections are easy to overcome. So when you come to a place and you say, here is what I'm offering, here is the price, here is what the service, an objection is, the timing doesn't work. The price is too high. I don't know that I'm getting enough value. I'd like more or less of whatever this is. Those are objections. Objections to me have always been kind of part of the negotiation, which is, it's fun because we're already there. We're already in that moment where it's like, okay, let's just get through these last couple components. Stalls can be nefarious because stalls are this human tendency to not want to make a decision. And that's for all of us, particularly big decisions, big buying decisions.
This is not someone that I am. And so I always have a hard time understanding it because it feels like I've pretty much made up my mind if I'm going to buy something before I even go into a sales call. And I just want to close it. I just want it to be done. If I'm the buyer.
Yeah, right.
Most people don't buy this way. And so I always have to try and get in the heads of the stall people, the people who stall, because it's just not me. It's not the way that I buy, but I don't think that I think I'm the exception rather than the rule in terms of business or decision makers. So when you're selling to a staller, what do you do? How do you structure a close for someone who's afraid of making a decision?
So this does get into our sales training for back in the day, but the vast majority. So what is a stall? A stall is an unstated objection. And when I say unstated, it's unstated in the buyer's mind. There's something they're feeling. Oftentimes it's this just discomfort. I'm not sure. I just don't know. I need to go talk to my spouse or my partner. I need to think about it. I need to go, shop around. Any of those sorts of things. Those are all potential objections, but they're not firmed up in the buyer's mind yet. And so the technique that I learned, and I think it's incredibly valuable, and I've used in a lot of other scenarios other than sales, is called questioning down. And so the idea there is almost all objections and unstated objections are price value objections, meaning that the value you're providing them does not tip the scales firmly enough for the price that they're going to be paying. So the simple technique that I've learned is just asking 3 questions, which is, I totally understand this is a big decision. I want you to make a good one. Just give them the space. And then say, but if you wouldn't mind, do we have the right solution for you? Do we have the right product? Do we have the right service? Is this the right thing? I just want to make sure that I've done a good enough job of presenting it. If the answer is yes, then you can go to the next question, which is, okay, is the timing right? Is everything okay as far as the implementation? Anything else that you have questions with, et cetera? And those are yes, no questions primarily because what your job is then you say, how do you feel about the price? And give them the opportunity to really start to clarify in their own mind what that feeling is on the price value objection. What is it? What is it the thing? And sometimes it's immediate. It's like, look, it's twice as much as I had budgeted. Like, okay, cool. Now let's make a decision. I might not be able to offer you 50% discount. I might be able to offer you 50%. You may be able to come up in price, but let's then have that conversation versus this nebulous kind of like pressure that's there, but you don't really know what's happening. Is that been, I mean, you've gone through the similar sales trainings. Is that something you've done?
Yeah. Yeah. But I often ask myself, like, what's the benefit of me pressuring somebody to make a decision today if they are naturally a person who needs to sit with a decision? Because I've had plenty of people who have said, okay, I just need to go and like process.
100%.
And then they come back a couple
100%
of days
fine.
later, they're like, let's go. Right.
That's
But I
100%
think
fine. Right.
right.
You should.
And one of the more powerful questions I've used and have seen used in that closing process is, what more do you need to know?
Yeah. What additional information?
What more is going to help you make a decision? And if they know what that is, then they'll tell you and you can work through it and what have you. And then but if they don't know what it is, this is a feeling, right? This is a lack of confidence in making a decision. And
Right.
even if they know, and I've had people on the other end say to me, this is incredible value. Like, I know this is good. I just like, they're not an instant decision maker. And at that point in time, the last thing I want to do is sell somebody into something that they're going to feel uncomfortable about. So one of two things is going to happen.
Right.
Right. But this is only when I know for sure that there's no like lingering objection, like you've gone through all of your questions. There's no lingering objection. There's not much more, like they're convinced of the value. And now they're just in a decision-making flunk, right? I've had people come back to me and say, the reason I decided to work with you is because you didn't pressure me into the sale. So I really believe in this whole like attraction. I only want people who are hell yes. And if I have to work too hard to convince you, it's not worth my time.
And I think that's the point. And this gets back to the original thing of what is a close in 2025. A close is just getting somebody to a decision. It can be yes, it can be no, etc.
Whatever that decision is.
Right. But this idea that I want to close somebody, even if they're on the fence, and push them into a decision, all you're doing is, that's in our world, Stephanie, it's churn bait. You're signing somebody up that's going to churn in a month. depending on your contractual terms. But,
Well,
in the world of SaaS, that's how we did it, right? You do a freemium and then you sign somebody up.
totally.
They would churn the next month because they didn't actually need or want the service.
We actually had a situation in the summer where we got on a sales call with, some people who had been referred to us. And we got off the sales call and we were like, oh, dear God, no, like this is not going to. And so we completely changed our offer to an offer that we were certain that they wouldn't take because they were already questioning us and being sort of crappy on and then they came back and they wanted it. And, we've been working with them now for a couple of months and it's about what we had expected, right? Like sometimes it goes the other direction. So here's a question for you. Should every founder be responsible for closing? And I say that from this perspective of, we think about the sort of the stereotypical tech founder who's a technical genius, but has never been trained how to sell, but also just not.
What for just recovering from the sneeze and just keeping going. That was impressive.
It's my menopause. It's one of the side effects.
It's going around.
It's going around. Hey, it's a good thing we're not talking in person because I didn't want to pass it along to you.
Yeah, I mean.
But you're already, I know you're already dealing with menopause.
No, I've got my own menopause going. Yeah, it's true.
Menopause. Yeah.
Which is way worse for the record.
It's like the man cold, right?
It's and man feelings. We all know that man feelings are way
worse.
God,
those are the worst.
We got the one feeling.
Anthony's got the one feeling.
He's got the one feeling.
Let's talk about your feeling. Okay, so should we? And I know we talked about every founder should sell and should know how to sell, but honestly, there are some founders I've worked with where I'm like, let's just let your team do the selling.
It's a really good question, and Anthony and I, from the beginning of this podcast, said, "Hey, that's your job. You got to go. If you're a founder, you got to get out and you got to go sell." But I think you're right that there are people who are like, maybe not.
I think you have to participate. You have to participate in the sales process, and typically, at the very least, it's being able to tell the story, right? That's super important coming from the founder. But I will argue that sales is a unique, independent skill set. And not everybody can sell. In fact, very few people can sell really well. So what role does, for some of these founders who have locked themselves in a closet for, 20 years and that's where they worked. And now they've had a good idea, built a product, but they're nowhere near ready or may never be ready to be the closer. So I think every founder needs to see and experience the sales process, but do they all need to be the closers?
It's a great question. I'm going to agree with you and say no, that there can be other people involved. However, just know that if you are the founder, Stephanie, and I am the employee, and we go into a sales call and I am a skilled, deeply experienced sales professional, and you're the founder, everybody's going to be paying attention to you and nobody's going to be paying attention to me. It's the implied power dynamics of the person that started. They want that person. They want that story. They want that involvement, engagement with the founder. And so you can probably get help along the way. You can probably have somebody help guide that conversation, but at least make sure that everybody's really clear that the power dynamic is going to be the founder will be the person in charge of the call, the conversation.
I think that's just fine, the way it is. Right? I think that's fine. And I think you can eloquently hand off the close. I think you can, sometimes it works really well that the founder is not the one who closes, because the founder is the one that we build the trust and we build the excitement and we build the visionary. And then and all they need is one small question they can ask to make that transition. And it could be like, we've had this dog and pony show. And in a sales conversation, I rarely talk about features. I rarely talk about what you're actually getting. I talk about I let them talk as much as possible, right? Tell me, and the first thing they'll do is tell you what's wrong, right? And that's sales gold. So by the end of, the consultative conversation and the conversation with the founder who's getting everybody excited, there can be a very simple transition where the founder's like, so what do you guys want to do? Like, should we talk about what this is going to look like for you? My colleague here, Tina, she's the best at sort of figuring out how this becomes implementable for, everyone's particular situation. I'm going to let her lead the conversation, but she's got all this experience, blah, 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 right? This is your partner. This is your, co-conspirator, whatever. But I think there's an elegant way to pass it off to someone who is a closer.
It's actually what you just discussed is a really viable closing technique, which is bringing in the implementation or the support or the trainer into the last call. And that becomes what we used to call the assumptive close, Stephanie, where it was like, look, okay, any other questions? Okay, cool. Is it okay if I bring in Tina? I don't know why you look at me and call me Tina. It was just that one time, Stephanie. That one time where I wore the
can't
Tina
get it out of my head. I mean,
Yeah.
the apron, I mean, that was over the top.
It was, yeah, I made it look good though.
It was your real you. I mean, that was very authentic.
Yeah,
I
it's very
appreciate
authentic. But hand it over, and Tina can talk to you about how this actually gets implemented. That is just moving naturally through the process. And if they say, sure, yeah, or they go, whoa, time out. Let's actually back up. That's them now stating either an objection or a stall or one of those things we've discussed.
Or they just really love the conversation that they were in and they want to talk more about it, whatever, right? But
Yeah.
I think you can take the pressure off of founders who truly, I think every founder should try. They should try and they should, get the training. They should be conscious of what a close looks like and how they can get there. But if it's still, just not panning out, I think that that's a viable strategy. Okay, my last question for you is, what does a sales toolkit actually look like and how effective are they?
In my mind, so, and this is more traditional, like when I was sitting in the chief revenue officer seats or more of the looking at an organization holistically. Marketing's responsibility was always the job to bring in a qualified lead, and sales job was then to move that qualified lead from qualified lead to a sale. So when I say a sales toolkit, it's really not about getting somebody to raise their hand. I think that that's traditionally marketing. Again, I lived in a world where we were trying to blend those worlds. So, growth marketing was about, there is no real difference between sales and marketing. It's just one function. But for a sales toolkit, what are the tools? I think they're teaching tools, Stephanie. It's about the curriculum that you develop to help teach somebody about how you solve this problem. So my role as a teacher today, as I go teach college classes, is remarkably similar to how I used to structure sales toolkits, which is just walking people logically through the problem and then offering information that they may need to be able to solve that. So what does that look like? Collateral, information, videos, testimonials, talking to other referrals, et cetera. Those are those components, but those are all simply building blocks that you can use to then build the individual experience for whoever you're sitting across the table with. Because really, and I think this is the heart of what you're asking, there is no such thing as a sales process. A sales process is my process. It's about you, the buyer, and it's about me and my ability to ask the right questions to understand where you are and try to move you through and just explain how I can help solve any problems. But a sales process, the way that we were taught back in the day, was qualify, present the benefits, ask for objections, all those sorts of things. I don't think that works anymore. What do you think?
I think it's so easy, like it's so simple because when you walk away from trying to have structure to your sales conversations, it becomes so much more natural. And when you say explain, I think it's discover, because I go into a sales conversation, even, and I think about this even in the, the corporate world. I go into a sales conversation, and to me, it's like a blank slate. And unless it's like a structured presentation, some part of a sales, like a RFP or something like that. But for the most part, I'm going in and I'm asking them questions. Like, this is discovery for us and it's discovery for them. So when you take away that power dynamic, like, or the fear, like, I have to turn this into something. No, I'm coming here to figure out whether we can actually make a difference for these people or not. And so it's very consultative. And by the time we're they've talked enough or finished talking, or there's not much more they can say, I've got so much material, and then I can move into here's how we can help you. But it's never ever an explanation. It's always just a response. It's a response to the discovery. And that's how I think about sales. And I always go in with a question as to whether this is a good client for us or not. And
I think that piece, just to drill down just a moment, we as early stage founders, we show up and we're so desperate to get this thing called revenue. And so we try so hard to get somebody to say yes. And you were just saying it. When you get somebody to say yes, it's the wrong customer. It's a freaking nightmare. Convincing somebody to do something that they don't really want to do or is in your best interest or theirs, or classically in our world, Stephanie, when they're like, oh, I like these two features, but I would buy if you just did these other things. And you're like, well, we're software nerds. We can go build that. Or it's a service. I can adjust how we deliver our service. And suddenly you're doing something different than what your core competencies are. And then you fail at doing those things. And so there's this entire other component that we've just barely touched on, which is a close really needs to be about you, the founder, too. Agree?
100%. And I would say a toolkit, if you're going to have a toolkit, it's just like, it is literally a toolkit. It is literally like a bag of tricks or a bag of support mechanisms that you can bring in to say, oh, yeah. Hey, I'm so glad you mentioned that. We worked with this other client at one point in time who had a really similar problem. Oh, I've got this case study here. I'll just leave this with you. I'll share that with you right now. But honestly, all those are distractions. Like, unless your sales process is that you have to go in and do a formalized presentation, you'll never use any of these things. It's like, get familiar and be able to speak really freely and with confidence about what you're selling, but be curious about each customer, because you're going to not only hear their story, but you're going to discover other things that you can build into your marketing materials that are going to help people move to a sale.
And that's also why we constantly say that founders have to participate in this, particularly early stage founders, because it's the closing of the loop. If you're responsible for delivery of the product or service, you got to be able to listen to the people that are giving you feedback.
100%. Okay. You want to do the speed round?
Let's do it, but you got to do it with me. So you have to answer the questions too.
No. Okay, are you mentally prepared? Are you emotionally ready for this?
No, I was asking for help. I was providing our own journey together. And you just,
why are you so fragile? Honestly. Okay. Prospect says, I need to think about it. Push for a decision or schedule follow-up.
Neither. Ask for qualifying questions, do the questioning down technique, ask for what's really behind this.
Yeah. And what do you need in order to make a decision?
Your question is even better than the 3 questions. My questions are very structured to get to price, but you can, but even just asking that simple question, okay, what other information can I provide that can be helpful?
Yeah. And then that's going to help you understand, is this an objection? Like, I don't have enough information, or is this just I'm comfortable making decisions? Okay, next question. Budget meeting ends with silence, assumptive close, or direct question about concerns?
I mean, in any human conversation, is awkward silence a good idea?
Sometimes silence is okay. Sometimes I have let the whole team sit in silence, because then it puts tension, their own tension, on thinking about what they want to do next. But jumping in and always trying to fill the silence it can spiral down into like this desperation energy. Silence can be very powerful. You're an idiot.
I'm just modeling silence.
Competitor mentioned during close, address immediately or focus on your unique value.
It depends, but I would always say the high road is always the only road to take. Just talk about you, talk about what you do, talk to your story. If the competitor is a better solution, then call it out and say, hey, these guys are better at what you need. Go with them.
Oh, I've done that. Yeah. Even better is to be like, oh yeah, they're awesome. They build a great product and it's really good for this particular audience. What I do know about it is that, when it comes to these other things, which you have mentioned that you need, it doesn't have a capability for, addressing those issues. So that's why we've kind of created what we've created. And, is to sort of fill that gap, but they have great product, right?
Yeah. Go check them out. You should.
Decision maker brings up price objection, negotiate immediately or reframe value first.
Neither. Ask probing questions to say, okay, price. So what are we talking about here? Is it implementation price? Is it monthly price? Is it total price? And let's just get comfortable. Like, it's okay for us to talk about price. It's not uncomfortable for me to discuss it. So let's just discuss it and then try to figure out. Again, there's no such thing as a price objection. It's a price value objection. And so
it's always a value objection.
Right. And so you then go back and ask yourself and the person, like, okay, what is it that's not quite like, how are we not stacking the value enough? And then potentially try to stack the value. Like, what if I gave it to you for a month free? That's the negotiation stuff.
Well, I never get into price negotiations ever because it's a slippery slope and you just can't win, right? But we can get into scope negotiation. We can get into co-investment scenarios, but I will never reduce my price ever.
I signed up for a very expensive software service yesterday for my company, and it was the end of the quarter, and they came back and were like, "Hey, what can I do to make you close this in the next couple of days?" I said, "Make it worth my while." Yeah. And they gave me a quote of the exact same price, but they go, "But we'll give you a month free." Fine.
Yeah, what's important to me?
Sign up anyway.
Like all sales comes back to understanding what's important to the buyer.
Yeah.
Always, right? Okay, last question. Multiple stakeholders with different priorities. Close the gap group consensus. Close with group consensus or individual commitments.
Again, this is one of those very terrible statements. It depends. In group dynamics, typically there's a decision maker or two. And ideally, you've tried to kind of figure that out along the way. And that decision maker will be the one who ultimately makes the decision, so long as nobody else says, I think this is crap. And so you just have to know through the process, like the process, to see how the dynamics of that group works.
I think you can facilitate consensus. I think you can put it back on them and say, I'm hearing two different things from you guys. And I think, what would be really important before we would go forward with this deal is to make sure that you guys are both on the same page and that you have a shared understanding. So can we just look at that for a second? And what I'm hearing from you is this, and what I'm hearing from you is that. Are we both clear on having your needs addressed, or do we need to hash this out a little bit more?
I have been in that exact same scenario. I have then been in a battle between two people, and then they start fighting, and I'm just in the room like, okay, I'm just gonna go now.
I don't want to sell to somebody who's not clear,
right.
Who's not
100% true. It is funny though, because I've been like, hey, let's. You guys okay? Are you on the same page?
I'm gonna excuse myself.
They're not on the same page. They need to hash something out.
Then we won't be successful, right? So good to know that early on. Okay, what did you take away from today's episode?
A close is simply a request for a decision. Traditional closes do not work. Those sales processes that we learned back in the day in 2025 manipulating people is not actually a thing anymore. You just simply need to continue down a natural sales process. I really like what you said, which is it shouldn't be about a stated sales process. It's just a conversation of getting to know somebody, and a close is a natural conclusion to that conversation, just like we're concluding this podcast today. It's a natural conclusion. That's what founder fundamentals are. Founders need to participate in sales, but they don't necessarily need to close. I thought that was a good one. And then founders need to qualify the sales for themselves as much as they are trying to sell to them, because selling to the wrong party can be very detrimental, particularly to an early stage company. What did I miss, Stephanie? I'm sure you had a couple more.
I don't know. I wasn't really paying attention.
Story of my life.
I think you looking at your role as a facilitator, as opposed to, going in there and feeling like you have to win. Salespeople are naturally inclined to win. They're very competitive. I would have been a great professional salesperson, because I go in and I'm like, okay, like give me the challenge and I want to solve it. Right. But I think if you go in there as a partner, as a consultant, as a facilitator, it changes the energy and the dynamic and can make you much more successful, because it doesn't put us in an us and them situation. It puts us in we're solving this together.
So I just think founders are so that's such a natural role for you to play as a founder and a CEO. It's the role that we have to play as a CEO anyway. Yeah. And so just doing that to external stakeholders is just like we do it with internal stakeholders.
I used to work in the first startup I worked in out of university. So that was where I got all my Xerox sales training, was because all of the executives for this little startup were ex-Xerox sales team. And so I got to watch them all together in the different roles that they would play. And the CEO, he was hilarious. He was like such a personable, extroverted, lovely guy. And he just had this technique where he would, get through the sales conversation and he would go, like, he'd do this and he'd be like, yes. And everybody would be like, yes, because he was such a personality. Does that make sense? And people would be like, yes, that makes sense. Okay.
Psychological technique called mirroring, pretty strong. That's as well, right. If you want to get into it.
So some deep dive resources: Spin Selling by Neil Rackham. That goes back a ways. And then The Challenger Sale by Matthew Dixon. Anything else you would throw in there?
No, I think probably Challenger Sale. I have not read, and I would love anybody to send me. I have not read a great new modern sales book in a number of years. I would love somebody to be like, yeah, here's the book that you need to read around the consultative, facilitative sales process.
Remember reading a book around relationship selling, like early in the day. And I think it still applies. I just can't remember what it was called. Okay.
That's a wonderful recommendation.
That's a good recommendation.
Hey,
yeah, read that book that I read.
Yeah,
read the book that I read, but I don't
remember the title.
Okay. Do you want to take us home?
Take us home. Yeah, it's like closing the sale there, Stephanie.
Just close us.
Close the sale. Thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate it. Love it if you could leave us a review on one of the places you listen. Maybe subscribe if you like our bullshit, which is, it's kind of fun. Our bullshit's pretty fun. And more than anything else, go continue doing the awesome work that you're doing, founders. It is incredibly inspiring to hear from some of y'all around the work that you're doing, and the fact that we can just offer a little bit of guidance, maybe a little bit of wisdom, maybe just a laugh on a Thursday, maybe us talking about our menopause.
Menopause and menopause.
Menopause, exactly. We will see you next week. I believe we got 3 episodes next week, Stephanie. I think so. So it's good.
Yeah, my last week before I'm off on vacay.
Also, stay on, because I might need you to cover for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. howtofounder.com. Come join us again next week. See you later.